It is my duty to inform you that only one candidate has declared his intention to stand for the election as Speaker, Mr. Don Toth, the Honourable Member of the Legislative Assembly for the constituency of Moosomin.
When I was first elected as a member of this Legislative Assembly, I felt my duty was that of a servant. As I leave the floor of the Assembly to assume the role of Speaker, I accept that not only do I serve my constituents, I now become your servant.
He just struck me right away as a very, very nice, very kind guy, very even keel, very intelligent, very articulate, and I kind of took to him right away.
I liked his attitude. He was really driven by service to his constituents. I knew that right away. When he talked about his constituency, he didn't talk about communities. He didn't talk about the size of the constituency. He talked about the people. But I can't tell you how many times he would drive home just to attend some little event. For most of us, we wouldn't be able to make the trip. We wouldn't be able to fit it into our schedule. Don made it a priority to be at those events. He's straightforward. He's a man of integrity, and you can take what he says at face value.
You know, Don is a true gentleman and a very committed Christian, and so he brought some really high standards and principles.
Wednesday mornings, he would always host a prayer meeting in the morning, sort of a Bible study, devotion time, that became for me one of the high points of the week, where you're in a fairly confrontational environment in the legislature, and that was sort of a grounding factor for me anyway. And I think
there's not a lot of official recognition of the importance of one's spiritual life, and I think Don thought that was a maybe a gap or a weakness in our political lives, and I think he wanted to make sure that he could contribute to something pretty positive in that regard. Don was one of the people who'd been elected probably the longest when the Saskatchewan Party was formed. He brought a corporate history.
He also was the only member that had ever served in a government. It sort of helped us a lot with some of the technical details of the House, and his experience was invaluable. Don would bring us back to being grounded and making sure that we maintained the values that we proposed, and he was always very stabilizing. Don, he's been here a long time and has served the province pretty incredibly.
When you were first elected, when you took your seat here, I was in third-year university at the time. Top Gun was the top grossing movie at the charts, and Walk Like an Egyptian was one of the most popular songs. That is a long time ago, Mr. Speaker. But it highlights for us the reality that you have the experience, you have the knowledge of this place, and as I've said earlier, you have the disposition and the grace and the personality to do this House proud.
Well, the presenters in the video do a great job of describing the attributes of our friend and a leader in this organization. I remember I was a young staffer in the legislative building when a by-election occurred in Moosomin, and I'm not sure if Don remembers this, but I got a chance to meet him early on, and what a remarkable then experience it has been for me to come back to that building years later as an MLA and learn a little bit from Don Toth. For any of you who are candidates for election, whether you're incumbents today or will be incumbents or are running anew, if you want to find out how to truly serve your constituents, if you want to hear a little bit about the work that's involved that was referenced there in terms of travel, but if you also then want to find out how do you ensure success, you should talk to Don Toth, because he's right. His approach has been that of a servant, and a servant drives after session to go to a constituency event, even if maybe he's a little tired or would just as soon stay home. More than that, he has contributed mightily and greatly to our government and to our party. And I just want to call him forward now to accept this small token and our very warm appreciation to Don Toth, who helped build the Saskatchewan Party.
thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Premier. Colleagues, it's a pleasure to be here this morning, but to be honest with you, I think this is a little over the top. It's just humbling when you think about where we've come from and what I've had the privilege of doing and having the pleasure of being a part of. And as the Premier has mentioned, as we saw in the video, and as Rod has mentioned, it takes a lot of hard work. But you know, there's one thing, Mr. Premier, you kind of reminded me of. When I was first elected in 1986, the party that I was elected to run under was $15,000 behind in their contribution to the party at that time. And lo and behold, we formed the new party, and guess what? They're looking for more money. A lot of work. But you know, ladies and gentlemen, I wouldn't be here tonight, or this morning, pardon me, if it wasn't for my wife and family. I think we as members all recognize that. In my mind, my wife, my family, and as you heard, my God, my faith were important. And that was a priority. And I've said this time and time again, when I've been at a constituency event and someone would come up to me and say, you missed our dinner last week. I've missed a few dinners. Then I'd think for a moment, yeah, I did. Oh, I was taking my sons to their hockey game. Haven't had that opportunity. And I'm honored to have been part of a constituency where people said, that's why we elected you. And I think that's truly important, and all of the other MLAs will probably say the same. But having formed the Saskatchewan Party, when I was elected as a Conservative, there were some exciting times. And then we went through some challenges. But as was mentioned in the video, as my colleagues and I were sitting in third-party status, and we observed the actions of some of the Liberal members, and I think as we heard, they were observing what we were saying. Inwardly, I think each and every one of us were thinking, oh, there's a lot of common denominators. And as we moved to that moment where we started to think, maybe we should put some of that in place, I couldn't help but think, when I was first elected, I ran into so many people in my constituents who were saying, why don't you just form a single party with a single voice? And that was coming from Liberals and Conservatives back even in the middle 80s. And then when we got there in 1997, and of course, now the rest is history. And ladies and gentlemen, how do you like Saskatchewan now? So I thank you. From the deepest parts of my heart, I thank you. Thank you, Mr. Premier, to each and every one of you, and God bless.
I should mention very quickly, Don's one of the many of you know this story, one of the reasons I decided to run in the end, because we had a very young family and we were concerned about the impact of politics on the young family. I talked to two people. One is a former MLA, Harold Martins, who had a young family when he started in politics, and I talked to Don Toth. And I asked them, could this be done? Could you balance these things? They gave me the same advice without telling each other. It was independent of each other. And Don's advice was basically, well, it's just like any other vocation or career. It's going to compete with time, for your time with family. So if you will it to happen, if you make it a priority, your family that is, you can do this. You can balance it correctly. And thank you for that advice, Don.